What if one of the simplest children's games was never meant to be a game at all? Hello, I'm Tatiana, and on today's episode of the Conscious Diva Podcast, I'm joined by Polina Rud, author of the new book, The Cosmic Game of Snakes and Arrows, an oracle for mapping your destiny. And long before Chutes and Ladders, or Snakes and Ladders, appeared in playrooms, there was Gyan Chaupar, the game of knowledge. It wasn't designed for entertainment, but for awakening oneself. In this conversation, Polina and I explore how this ancient spiritual map became a modern board game, what was lost when meaning was stripped away, and how the cosmic game of snakes and arrows invites us to work consciously with destiny, choice, and self-awareness. Whether we call it enlightenment, healing, or simply becoming more conscious, we're all playing the same game. If you enjoyed this episode, please write me a review or leave me a comment. You can also watch this on YouTube and connect with me on Instagram at The Conscious Diva. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for being here, Polina. It's great to meet you.
Well, thanks a lot for the invitation. And also I had some chance to watch some of your podcasts. And I'm really, really grateful that you start all these dialogues with people, because we truly need it. While we are so accelerated in this society, rushing for something that sometimes we even do not know. So I think it's very important that you are doing. Thanks a lot.
Well, thank you so much. That's very meaningful because your book is also really important. And The Cosmic Game of Snakes and Arrows, an oracle for mapping your destiny. It's really fascinating. You know, when it was first put in front of me, I immediately was like, wow, okay, this sounds like, Snakes and Ladders. And which it ended up being, but obviously the original. And I had a really quick look, not through the book, but through the information. And usually when I always read the books that are sent to me. And I normally have like 100 post-its all through the book, marking up all the sections. But this book was really different because it's the accompany manual to the actual game. So you can't, it's too hard to kind of do that because you just don't. I very quickly realized, it's just not serving a purpose to put post-its in here. I can be coming back and forth. So let's begin with the history of this. Like, let's talk about this amazing game and how it came about.
So this game initially, it has a Hindu origin, and it's not that easy actually, because it is a mixture of European and Hindu origin. It's in between the cultures, and that's the thing that I truly like. And as you mentioned, it's truly very similar to Snakes and Ladders, because every single person has played this game, right, with their family, with their friends, because once you throw a die, you then land on a snake, and then you go down when you land on a ladder, or in this case, in an arrow, so you go up, right? And there is nothing special about that. But the thing that mostly nobody knows is that this game had a very profound meaning, because once it was commercialized, this transcendental meaning was taken out, and it was converted into this children game. But initially it was a game in order to discover your consciousness and to discover different layers of your perception of this reality. So as you see that the first layers are more like psychological, it's all about your lineage, about your family, some patterns. But then you go up, you see that the classes that you're experimenting, or states that you're experimenting, they start to be more transcendental. Every single time you feel that you're being elevated. And right now I'm using passive voice, and I'm thinking you're being elevated or your spirit is elevating you. So that is the doubt also. But that's very interesting. And this game was used not only for transcendental aim and to discover your consciousness, but also sometimes it was used with political aims, with social aims, like any other oracle, because there is a story we do not know for sure, because there are lots of secrets and there are lots of mysteries of how it was created. But there is a historic figure, Sakya Pandita, and it is said that he may have used this tool in order to present Buddhism in Tibet. So he was thinking how to present this new philosophy in a new land to new people. But yeah, basically they are the roots. And the thing that I truly like, it is a mixture of cultures, because the dynamic that we see right now, like Snakes and Ladders, it also comes from a European game that lots of children at that time played. So it was a mixture. When colonizers came to India, they presented this part, like the dynamic of how to play this game, and the Indian culture presented the wisdom, the profound part of how this game might be played.
So I'm just going to backtrack for a moment. You said a lot of really great things very quickly. The original, or we can say one of the original names, perhaps from the Sanskrit tradition, Indian tradition, Gyan Chaupar, right? That's correct. And Gyan is wisdom, and Chaupar board game, or So essentially, it's a game of wisdom, we could say. Are you familiar with, in your own research, and when you're putting this together, and you talk a little about this in the beginning of the book, how can we use this? You obviously tell your personal story and you relate it to grief, but what was it that first drew you to this? You didn't know that this was an oracle, right? Like you just mentioned, as an oracle, and it totally is. It's been so watered down, as it was commercialized. The spiritual aspects of it were taken away. And I think in the United States in the 1940s, when the name was changed from Snakes and Ladders to Chutes and Ladders, it was done so because snakes were seen as, had negative connotations. So there's a couple of points in there. But firstly, what was your experience with using this, and how did you discover this game?
As you mentioned and gave this small detail, that for me it was this encounters or first meeting with the grief, because my boyfriend died in a car crash and I was completely disoriented, because at that time in Russia, right now I'm thinking, like, why didn't your mother or your family got you like a therapeutic session or anything like that? And it's true, because at that time in Russia it was not that popular, and you were supposed to deal with all these transcendental and sometimes very deep torments by yourself. So I found a book about Buddhism and Hinduism. It was an encyclopedia, and I started reading, and I started to find some answers about death, because obviously when I was 17, my only solution to all these internal torments was a very drastic one. I was thinking about a very bad solutions. And this game, once I encountered that, it was a kind of a mystical experience, because I went to a tea house in Moscow, and I was doing my things, and I was completely engrossed in studying. And then I heard, or I spied, a dialogue in between a translator and a group of Hindu people, Hindu philosophers. I do not know actually who they were. And I understood that, well, there is something interesting. It's not only like I can read inside of books about religious or about philosophies, but I can have a dialogue. And that was so important for me, because every single time I was questioning about justice. If it is just that it happened to a man of 17 years, is it just that it happened to me, to his family, to his mother? And it was an amazing mechanism for me, because at that time they presented me this book, because I was like, I'm really sorry for these people. Maybe I was not that ethical enough, because I just approached, I was like, I'm sorry, I just heard your dialogue, and I'm really interested, because right now I'm passing through this moment, because it was a row of deaths that I was experimenting in my life. Every spring occasionally, and I'm also mentioning it in the book, that it was very symbolic for me. Okay, spring is being associated with the period of transformation, and for me it was like, oh my god, I don't want spring to come. I was afraid of spring to come every single year. So yeah, they presented me a book that was written by Harish Johari, and in our traditions also they published this book several decades ago, and I started to question this game. I started to read, but at that time I was also understanding that the concepts are so complex that I had to create a kind of exercises for me, or some questions, because I needed some time to ponder, to reflect on every single square. It was not the matter of, I did not know, 2 or 3 years, hours to play. It was a matter of like playing for about 2 weeks, because every single time you were asking, questioning, doing my own exercises. And by the way, these exercises entered as a part of this book that I published, because I felt that sometimes it's not only necessary to read, but also you have to reflect what's going on inside you. And maybe everything that you're reading right now doesn't coincide with everything that you're feeling. But while you're doing these exercises, there is this chance to feel what you're reading, because sometimes it's really different to understand and to
Yeah.
feel with your heart.
Yeah, and I was wondering that, and I think it's you've written this book from a place of lived experience. And so as you just said, you've included some questions to ponder when you land on a certain square. And that's really helpful. You know, it's nice that you wove in examples from the art world, whether it was film or actual art, or just ideas for people, or music even for people to sort of think about, and reflect upon. So those are really beautiful tools that you've offered and shared in here to assist the reader or the player of the game. At that time when you received this book and you began using the game, did you realize that it was the original Snakes and Ladders?
No, actually, I was completely detached from the reality. I was looking for some answers, and for me, it was difficult to understand that that's a children's game or that's a Hindu game. I was 17, I was 18, so it was difficult to find a holistic picture of what is going on and to understand that that's this part of that, this part of that. I think that I was perceiving the reality very partially. So it was a kind of a puzzle for me. And at that time, and maybe still, it's not that complete. So every single time you think like, oh my God, right now I understood how all these puzzles are being integrated, and in a year you're like, oh my God, I was completely mistaken. So yeah, I think not.
So then with the symbolism, the spiritual meanings and the spiritual symbolism within it, where you've said transcendental, but another word for that is like self-realization, right? To come to this place where we can understand our consciousness and step into an expanded state of awareness. When you were looking at that original one, your one, which I'm going to lift up in a moment, you've got the Sanskrit names. I also really love the Hindu tradition, and my practice is rooted in this tradition. So when I was reading your book, I really loved that you had the names. I understood very much a lot of the information, but I think a person doesn't need to have any understanding, come from a yogic tradition or a Hindu tradition or Buddhist tradition at all, because you've translated everything very clearly into English and given very good examples of all of that. So the question I was wondering is, were there English translations for you? Were you given it, and did you have to figure everything out?
That's a very important question, because we are touching like the ethical basis. How me being Russian, I can just speak about Hindu tradition in general and working, because I don't know Sanskrit language, right? So there is an interesting part of that Harish Johari, he was the first one of the first people who approached to this game, and he was working with shlohas. Shlohas, they are like sounds. I'm really sorry if I'm pronouncing badly for all the people that speak Sanskrit, but he was working with the sounds, because this book did not have any kind of interpretation, linguistic interpretation. And I think it's so true and that's so correct, because as Octavio Paz, a Mexican author and poet, said that we are like linguistic monkeys. We cannot think of this reality without language. And every single time it's good, but at the same time it's bad, because we are limited with language, how we say. And all the interpretations were transmitted to the audience, to people who were playing with sounds, with this vibration. And I think every single time when we start doing yoga, for example, and when we 3 times pronounce this Om, I think the vibration is changing. And actually, there is a square on this game board which is called Om sound or Omkara. And this square, once you land on this square, it was supposed for you or for the audience playing this game at the same time to pronounce this 68 times, as far as I remember, in order to be synchronized, in order to be tuned to transmit the state where you have to be. And I think it's very precise, because anger, we have some concepts about anger, for example, or about compassion, but how you can transmit it with the sound. So my admiration to Harish Johari, who worked with all these sounds. But then he mentioned that all this knowledge was lost. So I didn't have any access. I tried to look for that and to do this research, but mostly I have been researching his book, and at the same time I have been researching all these Sanskrit names, because it was important for me not to be based only on his interpretation, but on how I feel the Sanskrit things. And at the same time, for example, Eurasia, I was exploring Eurasia, and then I understood that I wrote something, and in a couple of months or sometimes in a year, I had to rewrite that, because I felt that my interpretation was really rational. And that's where you're coming back to my personal lived experience, because I was thinking like, okay, you got it very rationally. And some time ago, I had very mystical experience with a meditation, with very profound meditation. And I remember there was somebody saying to me, "Oh, you have read lots of books. Ha ha ha. You didn't understand anything. Right now, we are going to pass you through all these experiences, but with your own body, with your own understanding." So, yeah, it was a mixture in between shklochas and between what Jahari interpreted and in between what I felt while investigating and researching all these Sanskrit names, how I was feeling them, and then how I was experimenting them in my own life.
Wow, that's amazing. I love that. And such power to you for doing that, because that is a very time-consuming experience. Because
Yeah,
Sanskrit, one phrase can have such an extensive meaning that really is so difficult and sometimes cannot even be translated to, well, often not just one single English word, but an entire phrase, right? So you have like one word that is being spoken in Sanskrit, but then if it was to be translated into English, it's a sentence, or a feeling, or a connotation that expands into another field, into the quantum field. So it's so difficult to break that down, and you almost have to feel into, meditate, drop into the experience versus trying to intellectually understand as a definition what the word means. Would you agree?
I agree completely, because sometimes while we are thinking about Japanese or Chinese languages, there are some states and words that we cannot transmit into English or into any other language. You have to explain that how it feels.
Mm.
Or while we are speaking about Scandinavian countries, there are concept of coziness, right? And there are lots of books written about this or that concept, because you cannot transmit it with one singular word.
Mm.
And you mentioned very important for me thing, like feeling or diving into this state, because and my teacher or professor in rune or runology taught me that, because I took one course that lasted for 1 year about runes, and there were no lectures.
Wow.
We were given a rune, and we have been working with this rune for 1 month. What we were doing, we were writing poems, we were feeling how this rune is being manifested in our life, how we are interacting with the deities that are behind this rune. We were
Mm.
also supposed to read some mythology, and I really like that, because there was no mediator in between my perception of this rune and in between what a professor or my master told me about this rune. So I implemented something like that while I was discovering each square.
That's beautiful. And I just wanted to quickly ask you, explain how that same concept is applied to the dice and the character you choose to represent, because your game included in the book doesn't come with dice, doesn't come with little things that you move, shapes or other accessories, right? You are leaving that up to the reader to pick their item. So just explain a little bit about how these items become parts of ourselves and really work in harmony with the game, and almost and these are the sort of the oracle aspects too. We're feeling into this and it's guiding us along the board.
To say the truth, I'm gonna sound very bad right now, but I think that I'm really detached right now from any objects. I feel that all the amulets that we have, they are very important, and it depends on what meaning we're giving them. But also, it's very important to be detached. So I want to have my amulet, and I want to admire it, and I want to pray with it. But next day, I want to be free in order to throw it or in order to present it to another person, because I truly feel that we should not give lots of value to these objects or any kind of material things. So, and that's why every single time I'm saying, yeah, while I'm giving these ceremonies of snakes and ladders, snakes and arrows, I'm saying, yeah, you have to bring your amulet, or with what you're going to play. You can take a coin, you can take anything, because I truly believe in the power of your intention right now. If my intention to put everything with what I'm connected to this object right now, it's beautiful. And then I don't need this object. And I think here we gain this freedom that we truly need, because sometimes people are getting really obsessed with all the amulets or things that surround us. And sometimes they feel frustrated if an object was lost, etc. So I truly want people have this freedom to say, okay, it doesn't matter. It's important for me right now, but I choose this period of time when this amulet, for example, or any kind of object or a rune or something is important for me. And
Mm.
speaking about dice, you can take any dice, because you can even use random number generator, because God will find the way, or your spirit will find the way to communicate. Even sometimes you can say that you don't have to have any game or anything, so that God would communicate to you or send you a message. And that's so beautiful, because, and there is something very like kind of a rebellion from this spirituality, that I'm not going to use a very sacred dice, but I'm going to use a random number generator. And I think here there is something like a kind of a revolution of a spirit, something like I'm going to do like that, and nobody will tell me anything, because I will define where God or my spirit will have a chance to communicate me. And because the meaning of a die is so important, because lots of philosophers, lots of people, or in Rig Veda, because people at that time, they were treated these dice like living forces, and they were like messengers in between human beings and something greater. So it can be anything, right? Any kind of material, any kind of things that I want to use for that, if we are saying. But die is very important, because randomness also humbles the ego, right? You're
Yeah.
no longer the sole author of meaning.
Hmm.
And you're like, okay, I'm not alone, and I have to integrate my ego, my responsibility to somebody or something else.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to lift up the game and show. So there it is. And it comes in the back of your book, which is really cool. And my amulet is a horse, and
Oh,
my
beautiful.
my spirit animal. And this one, I don't carry it around with me. I don't meditate with it. It just sits on my desk actually. And but because it's upright, rearing up on back legs, I thought that was the one that came to me intuitively. I was like, okay, that's the one I'm going to use. And as we move into this year of the horse as well, with the fire horse, I just felt like that was the representation of moving forward and the energy. And then I did just use a dice to roll on it, but it was I haven't completed it yet. And as you said, this is not you don't sit down and just play to get it done in an hour. I mean, I guess people can, the commercial version, but to be played with intention. And so I began as you recommended on the top, and it took 5 rolls to get out of there.
That's pretty quick. It's not that much.
Okay, well, I wasn't. I thought I'll just share with you the experiences, and also with listeners, because my intention, I started doing this. I actually just started doing it yesterday. I really wanted to have it fresh before we spoke. And so I just let it out, and I just held the intention, let this reveal to me what I need to know moving forward for the now in this moment, also for this year, but really specifically in this moment. And so then I started at 1, and then I went to 6 right away after that. And as you said, all the things are it's so interesting. Was it 6? Let me put my glasses back on. I think it was 6, yes, because I didn't go. No, it must have been seven. I didn't go to six. Must have been seven because oh no, that's the snake pulling. It was six. So I went to six and then I went to 10. And then after, so six is attachment. I'm going to just say all what they are. Then I went to 10, purification. Then I went up I followed the arrow up to 23 to heaven. And then I sat with that and I just felt like, okay, these are the three pieces of information that I needed to receive. I'm going to sit with these and not, and I feel like I should stop now. No, I'm not going to continue. I need to just sit with this. And then last night I thought I would come back to it. And I just felt like, no, the energy has shifted. I'm going to wait. I'm going to do it in the morning. And then this morning, it was so interesting. I'm getting divorced. So I was like really like in a little bit of a negative headspace and feeling very like, man. And even though I'm really trying to practice not that, I keep saying, it's all right, you're human. It's okay. You can feel bad for a minute, you know. So then I rolled the dice and it had me go slide, interestingly. You'll probably laugh. Okay, so I was at 23. Okay, so it had me just go one space over to 24 to bad company. And then, of course, I read that one. And then I slid back down to six, back down to attachments. And that all totally made sense. And it was so interesting because, as you said before, when we're rolling the die, I was like, no, I got one. What? Like the ego was so like, no. And then I just opened your book and read it and went, no, that is exactly where I need to be. This is exactly the message. This is these questions that you've included. This is exactly what I need to be pondering. And then I went back down to six. And then after that, I went to 27, selfless service. And then I ended at 41, which I'm at now, which is the human plane, I think it says. Yeah.
Mhm.
So I have to squint my eyes. I'll put my glasses back on. So that's where I'm at. I'm sitting on 41 right now, and I'm going to leave that for the day. But I just think it's quite magical. It's really when you play it approach it, I should say, not play it, but approach it from a place of intention as you recommend, but also with the oracle concept, it can reveal moments for us, as I'm sure it was designed to do. I think it's great. But now, so how do multiple people engage in this at the same time?
So at first, to comment several things that you mentioned, because you brought very crucial moments to that. When we start playing, sometimes I say, be careful with competition and be careful with frustration when you go up and go down then, and like, I'm worse than others, because once you play it personally, like one to one, it's okay. But when you see that other people have already entered, or they are very advanced in their understanding or in the game, and you feel that you go down, or you're completely stuck in one, I don't know, envy, for example, or a bad company, and you cannot, and every single time you land on this square, you feel that there is something bad with me. What's wrong with me? I think that the worst question that may happen to your trauma, to your self-esteem, to anything, because it's not about that. It's not the question, what's wrong with me? The question is like, what am I not seeing? What is something that I'm not seeing and I have to adjust inside so that to advance, right? And all the arrows that you landed, like for example, purification, they're so beautiful. And every single time, once we land the arrows, we understand that once there are a lot of energy in that, and you start to feel like lighter. You feel that this purpose, your intention is so correct. And another thing, as for purification, it's so important while we are passing through traumas or difficult decisions, because we have to get rid of everything that our mind was mm, poisoned by. Because I really like this metaphor, and while I'm thinking about purification, I'm imagining our perception, our consciousness, as if it was a castle, and there are some doors in this castle, and these doors should be guarded. They should be protected by guardians. And what are the doors of our perception? They are ears, they are eyes, they are our nose, right? They're our mouth. And once there is a thought, or what we saw, or a message, or something that penetrated into our perception, into our consciousness, and the guardians were not there, here is the problem, and that's why we need to not only to purify our senses, but also to revise and revisit where my guardians are awake or they are drunk and there is something happening there, because it's very important. And sometimes we should be prepared for an attack while we are making difficult decisions, because it's very, very significant and very important to understand that sometimes I allow myself to feel bad. I allow myself to feel angry, to feel depressed, to feel frustrated, because I'm a human being. It's my part of darkness. And once we understand this part of darkness, we feel like more complete, because I think God or universe would be really grateful once we see the other side of God, because God is not only positivity, but it's also a shadow part. And while I was mentioning like this penetration to our consciousness through these doors, we have to be prepared for these attacks while we are making decisions, because every single time there might be a question like, am I doing right? Maybe I was mistaken, or maybe I'm a bad, I don't know, mother, wife, or there are lots of questions that may come, and that's why we have to be prepared. I know that these questions are going to attack me, but I have prepared my answers. Because once we are in this anxious mind, or once we are nervous, it's not the time to find the answers to the questions, because we will enter into these states, right, of self-punishment and all those things.
You mentioned how there is a man in your book, and it took him 2 hours to roll the die to move forward, or just continue,
Yeah.
while everyone around was playing and was moving forward. And you kind of answer that in regard of not, don't compete. It's not a game of competition to get to the end first, which I think it became, right? Like Chutes and Ladders, or whatever, Snakes and Ladders, the modern version, has completely removed all of the spiritual aspects. It's just a silly game now. The goal is who's going to get to the end first, and some people are going to slide back down and some people are going to climb up. And it almost has become the irony, it's almost just become this competitive climbing the corporate ladder almost type of scenario, versus the spiritual attributes that it originally was meant to be, to help a person to actually transcend and have an understanding of their higher self.
There is an antidote to that, because in this game, and while we are thinking that I want to transcend quickly or faster than others, think about that you want to die faster, because you want to skip your life. Because once you transcend, you come to another life, or it depends on philosophy that you're using in your life. But while we are speaking about this game, like, why are you so accelerated? Because every single day we are approaching to the very same place for everyone, to the death. So do you want to do that, or do you want to enjoy the experience that is happening? And answering your question, how to play with multiple players, mostly once I play with them, it's like 10 people maximum, and we spend for about from 5 to 7 hours to play. And we start to use this game also a kind of a constellation. When you listen to other people, when you also understand, because you're being reflected in another player, in another experience. So yeah, it takes lots of time, but sometimes when I see that a person is really is understanding the game and everything that's going on, and he's very, or she's very profound, and how they are interpreting everything, sometimes I help this person to enter the game, and we start playing, and then, for example, I give some exercises, and that's it. And then this person is playing, and from time to time I'm approaching this person. It's how I work, for example, on retreats when we have, I don't know, 30 people, right? So I divide them into groups, and it's very rare when I don't help them enter the game, because that's the most difficult part, to understand and to decipher, to dissect your intention. And then I give some exercises, then they advance, and then in a couple of minutes, in 10 minutes, I come back, and then we start chatting and something like that.
Okay, so some people can be stuck on the top. What number is it? It's 68. Oh no, is it six? No, 63. So people can be stuck on 63 for a while before rolling a six to get off?
Yeah, sure, because there is a 72 on the game board, and you can go to 72 and then you have to go down. You have to go to the earth because you have already have some intentions or some
Mm.
things in order to finish in these planetories or in this reincarnation. So that's why you may stay there. And even, for example, there is a I also am going to use my board game. I also have it. When you are on 69, you can also spend a great deal there because in order to come out from 69 to 72, you have to throw only one, two, or three. And your intention should be very precise. And if it's not precise and you cannot understand why you have to come back to the earth, you're there in absolute plane.
Yeah, wow. That's really great, isn't it? And how are those players reacting? Do people accept, or are they, most of them, is there a human reaction of, oh God, what do I have to keep learning? Like,
I remember lots of stories of people who cannot enter the game at first, and it's like it's a torture for them because we are working. It doesn't necessarily mean that if they don't enter, they are not dissecting their psyche. They are, but I remember the tears of happiness of several people when they entered, like finally, like it was a kind of a torture for them.
wow.
And I remember different people, they just decided to stop playing the game because they cannot stand the envy circle. Every single time, envy, envy, envy. They
Wow.
try to work out. We did exercises. And I think,
Wow.
I'm not sure whether I'm mentioning this story in my book, but I remember sometime a man just decided to quit the game. He closed the door and like, Polina, I cannot do it anymore. In a couple of weeks he came back because he said that I cannot stand this envy, and I'm experimenting envy from other people towards me because not every single time it's about me having envy. But anyways, we are being reflected, yeah. But and he continued playing. But for him, the continuation of this game was like in 2 weeks, understanding that he cannot finish. And I really like that you mentioned that you finished your game for this day, for example, on purification and then this arrow. It is very logical and it's really safe because I strongly don't recommend people to finish on like bad company or envy or I don't know, anger, for example, because
Yeah.
these states will stay with you. You have to come out of that. You have to adjust something inside so that to feel this relief from these emotions.
I mean, I did roll the die after that, after I ascended, and I did get a one. So the next one is the fire, the Agni Loka, which I do a lot, I actually do a lot of work with fire and fire ceremonies, and so and chant the Agni mantra. But I had not stepped on that, moved forward yet, because I just thought I will come back to this afternoon, and then I will let it move, let it go for the day, until I, feel called tomorrow to kind of step back in and see what the messaging is for tomorrow. But you mentioned envy, and I think that's a really interesting tile or square to land on. I think in modern days, comparison culture is a really huge thing, and word envy often isn't really associated with that. You talk about it really well in that chapter. Just would love for you to expand on envy and what the person can potentially, as an example of one of the words, what a person can potentially reflect upon and expand with some of the questions you wrote there.
Envy is all about comparison. When I'm comparing myself to other people, and sometimes while we are so surrounded by social media and desires of other people, we even cannot decipher what is where my own desire is. What do I really want? And envy comes from that on the one hand. When I want something that another person wants because I'm comparing. And in this state, obviously, I feel worse than another person, and my self esteem goes up, and it's not stable. And I start to humiliate myself, and it's all about envy. On the other hand, envy, lots of psychologists coincide here that envy also might be our like the direction towards I should go, but there is something inside that doesn't allow myself to advance, or there is something inside that impedes me to advance. And that's why I should treat envy as the direction that I truly need this, and my soul shows me the way, but there is something that I have to figure out in order to make these steps towards, right? But envy, it's all about that. It's all about comparison from that comes from sometimes insecurity, that maybe I'm not that sure who I am, and that's why I have to put different masks. And I know people who are living inside of masks, and that's so strange, because you see that one year they're copying one person, another year they're copying another person, and they are not like living inside of a mask that protects them, because it might be kind of a protection mechanism. That's another thing. They are putting different masks because they are trying different identities. And there is a strong fear of being this authentic me, because being authentic me means accepting the rejection that people will hate your authentic me, and people will reject you. And once they reject you, you're like, oh my God, I was rejected. Do I have the right to leave? So that's why sometimes we don't want to show our authentic me, or my true personality, because if it is judged, if it is rejected, where I'm going to escape.
Yeah.
So I think it's all about envy.
Based on what you've just said, this is an incredibly relevant application for modern times. Just because it's an ancient game does not mean it can't be played today. And it can be very easily applied to all of the experiences we're going through at this time. So just talk a little bit about that. How can someone comes to you and they're like, oh, but it's got all these, phrases I don't understand, or it's this ancient concept. What do you say to them? And then do you guide them?
Starting with ancient concepts, I would love to quote Stefan Zweig. I really like him. He said that history changes costumes, but human passions repeat themselves. So it does not mean that we have changed. We may have changed technology, we may have changed the context, everything, but the human spirit is passing through same classes, same experiences, same uncomfortable states. And all these ideas are really, really familiar to a person from the 20th century and to a person from a 16th century, for example. I don't think that we have changed so drastically, because we can take this purification or vanity, we can take it to 17th century and we can take it to 21st century, and the person is going to feel the same. Maybe the circumstances will change, or the provocations, external provocations may change, but how this person is experimenting this state, I think it's the same. Speaking about different phrases or difficult ways of expressing, my task was to put it simple, and to not to write a philosophical book, but to combine all the knowledges that transcendental philosophies, psychology, different kinds of sometimes even coaching may have for us, in order to understand it, to make it really simple. Because the problem sometimes why we cannot find the answer, because we make it more and more complex every single time. And while we are entangled in these complex things and thinking that psychology or my psyche is so complicated and I cannot figure out what's going on, while I'm giving my therapy, or while playing this game, I'm showing like it's not that difficult. You see the reason, and then we have to find what are the consequences of that. And we are seeing secondary benefits. Why do you need this state? And then we are analyzing why your spirit on karmic level needs that, for example, to be born in this family or to have this problem, and why your soul as a secondary level is experimenting that, and have these provocations toward, have these reactions toward these provocations of other people. So that's why I try to use, on the one hand, quotes, because they also like make it more clear, crystalline, or transparent for people who want it really quick to understand what I'm speaking about. And on the other hand, I included these exercises that I have already mentioned, because sometimes people, I'm tired of reading or of consuming information. But if you're going to do these exercises, you will also understand something about this square. You will figure out, you will have some insights. And if you have more irrational mode of perceiving this reality, you can also watch a movie or listen to music that I'm mentioning that I feel that correspond to this square. Because sometimes people want to perceive it, not like rationally understand. And you mentioned these artworks, and why did I include them? Because I feel that sometimes trauma cannot be approached that easily. And sometimes we want to speak about trauma as if it happened to another person, when it is really far away from me, from my own experience. And while I'm watching a movie, I can resonate, or listening to music or reading a book, I can resonate with the main character. Then I can just cry it out or understand something. And then I can understand that I'm not single in this, but I'm not alone in this bubble with the same trauma. And then I can speak about it, and maybe then I can read what I wrote about this or that square. So yeah, don't be afraid that it's really complicated, because maybe there are some names of Sanskrit names of each square, but that's the most complex part of the book. I don't know what you think.
Well, I loved it. I love it. I think it's great. And like I said in the beginning, the Sanskrit words I'm familiar with not all of it, but with many. So I recognized many of the words and understood the meanings. And then the ones that I didn't, I was like, oh, great, this is awesome. You know, fantastic that you've got this in here. Yeah. So thank you. Yeah, really, it was really great. And I will continue to play it. And my 16-year-old daughter also wanted to get on the board as well. And I'm like, yeah, you totally should. I said, you can join me. Like, it's not a competition. You should join me and get on. And if there's, you know, she likes to pull oracle cards. I'm like, it's similar concept. You can just, you know, we can be on it at the same time, but we're both on different paths in our lives at different times, because I'm 30 years older than you. You know. Anyway, it's good. So how can
That's
people?
amazing to share a moment with your daughter and seeing in between each other what's happening. Because on the one hand, we are older than our children, but on the other hand, sometimes it's even easier to see several seeds that are growing in our children. But for us, we don't see something, or they are like these points that we don't want to see. And that's very interesting to play with your family members, or in this case with your daughter. That's magical.
Yeah, I thought it would be. Thanks. So now, how can people get a hold of you? And is there anything else you'd like to share?
I think that's the most important thing why I created this book, is because I see that our world right now is living in polycrisis, and while we are living in polycrisis, we are struggling with uncertainty. And as Eric Fromm said, that the human mind often prefers a false certainty to an honest doubt. It's very important to understand how I can face this uncertainty. And I consider this game this training mechanism of how I'm handling this uncertainty. Because every single time the reality is shaking, we feel that we are ready to cede the reins of our life to any other person, to any dictatorship, to any right-wing politics. And that's why I feel that socially it's also an important tool to train how you are handling your resilience towards this uncertainty. Because while we are feel uncertain, we can make very bad decisions, because uncertainty used to mean real danger for human being historically. It used to mean famine, exile, death. So our nervous system learned to prefer predictability over truth. And that's why here we are training that it does not matter how, I don't want to say bad, how strong or how difficult the truth is, I know that every single time I can rectify, I know that I can handle it. And I think it's a beautiful mechanism to train how I'm going to handle uncertainty, how I'm going to handle this jump into the void. And while I'm jumping into the void and training that, because inside of a game, it's really easier to train everything that's going on, right? Because, for example, if there is trauma or some uncomfortable situation that happened to a child, Donald Winnicott said that we have to reproduce the same, but in the format of a game, in order to replay all this traumatic experience and to live it, or to come out of it like glorious with victory. Because only in this case, not suppressing it but replaying it, we can feel that there is no bad thing that it happened to me. I could get up and I could continue. And I think knowing that really helps to jump into the void, to jump into these uncertainty. And that's why on social level, I'm speaking about social level because also I co-founded an NGO which that is called The World Hurts, and we are giving psychosocial support, free psychosocial support for activists. And that's why I see that sometimes when we do that with activists and with people who are inside of these anxious moments, uncertain moments, when they don't know where they're going to live or whether they are under the danger, really true political danger, and they start to envision their life inside of a game, or they start to make these decisions and replaying different scenarios that may happen to them, they feel it easier. So yeah, I think that's going to be the answer to your question. And if anybody wants to buy this book and to play with their families or with their friends, to spend this time together, because uncertainty used to be lived collectively long time ago, because there were like communities. But while we are living right now inside of these capitalistic bubbles alone, we're handling this uncertainty alone. And I don't think it's a good idea to do that. That's why we have to maybe to opt sometimes to play with your family or with your community, because it's also sharing a burden, sharing this uncertainty, that we can do it together, and it feels very, very different.
And what is your website? Where can we find you?
My website is Polina Rud, POLINARUD.com. So there you can find any information about the game, about the book, about how to book your sessions, whether it is therapeutic sessions or sessions with this game. And also you can find me on Instagram and write me there. So any media that you want to use, you're welcome.
Amazing. Well, thank you very, very much. It was so fun to chat to you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Tatiana, for inviting. And also, I'm waiting for your message once you finish the game, or any kind of your revelations, or if you're going to have any questions, you or your daughter, I'm more than open so that I can give you a feedback, or maybe you have some doubts. More than open, we can have a call or in an email, because I'm really interested in how people are experimenting and experiencing this game, what kind of conclusions they are making.
Thank you. I will definitely do that.
Thank you.